So, for my own purposes at least, I've decided I'm going to record the process of reading this book, Pompeii by Robert Harris. Personally, this is actually a thing for class where because I'm currently taking a class that's related to the archaeology of Pompeii, and the examination of this text versus the more academic text is the sort of purpose. And as such, I'll probably be focusing on the way these two interact. You know, inaccuracies and stuff, but as I'm only taking this as a sort of college class, I don't think it would be perfect. And I might go back and hate this someday, but that's life. Yeah, so far, I've only read like 4 pages. Less than that, really, because it's considering the intro is pages. But so far, we are introduced to a young man and aqueducts. I'll probably jump in every once in a while, but this outfit will change and stuff because I'm going to be doing this over days for class and stuff. The book is only like 274 pages, roughly. Not roughly, I just checked. But that is the thing. So far, it's about a man who works on aqueducts and is driving people early in the morning. There's apparently a drought ongoing, or lack of rain, really. There's no proof that it's a full drought. But it's interesting. The one interesting note is the very beginning. The very beginning, after the map and the date, is this. This quote. I don't know if that's in focus. A strong correlation has been found between the magnitude of eruptions and the length of the preceding interval of repose. Almost all very large historic eruptions have come from volcanoes that have been dormant for centuries. Jacques Marie Bottonzeff, Alexander de McBurney, volcanology. Forgive me, I can't really say that very well, but it's an interesting beginning to what is essentially and very much described as a novel, but I suppose it is supposed to set the tone, adds a little bit of danger that there is death around the corner, I suppose. I don't know. Or maybe make it seem more... Anyway, see you later. Alright, so, finished the first chapter. So far, it appears to be about a, like, they call him an Aquarius, but he is not necessarily the zodiological thing. He is a person who is basically a water engineer. He's up in the early morning looking for water in the middle of a drought. From what can be told, it's not particularly do much. Marcus Antilius Primus. But the interesting part is I've just gotten to the next chapter. Let me try this again. See if it looks better. Come on. There you go. Basically, it's another quote from the same book as the first one. Volcanology, the second edition. A question of practical importance in questioning how much time between the injection of new magma and an eruption ensues. In many volcanoes, this time interval may be measured in weeks or months, but in others, it seems to be much shorter, possibly days or hours. Which, okay, interesting, very interesting, I guess. Still does not actually pertain to the narrative. The next seems to begin with a completely different individual, and none of this actually takes place in Pompeii so far, despite the title. It's Pompeii. Which is interesting. It's mostly in Mycenaeum right now. I mean, interestingly, if you look at some of the notes about the cultural aspects of this, one of these characters that's been named is Gaius, Gaius, Gavus, US, in Latin, these are pronounced as u, is used basically because there was actually a tangible difference. U's and V's were used interchangeably, mostly because of the way they were written into stone. It's hard to make curves, that's why you see very sharp lines, and most of these inscriptions are written entirely in what we would now call capital letters. But Roman first names are really, really, for men, because women didn't have first names, unfortunately. It was just, you can see that like Julia the younger, Julia the older. That's just what they did. 1, 2, 3, 4 at a certain stage. But for guys, there are not many first names. You got Gaius, Gnaeus. I mean, there's Gnaeus, like there's Marcus. Like there's very few of them. I have never heard of, and nor is there like an abbreviation which shows it's like a really normal first name, Gaiusus. Most likely, I would guess it's a misinterpretation of the name Gaius, or misprinting. Maybe the V was added accidentally, because it just doesn't make sense otherwise. Anyway, I will get back to you if I see anything more interesting. Probably won't go every chapter because not all chapters are as interesting. Anyway, thank you for listening. Bye. But things been crazy. So, at this stage, we're looking at page 61 at this stage. All of the aqueducts are going down. Let's see. I think you hadn't. So it starts with a slave kind of being executed by eels. He's thrown into the eel pond and eaten, which is very interesting because that is actually a true way in which some masters killed their slaves for gross misbehavior. It eventually, I believe, got outlawed because it was so cruel, or limited, but slave was killed by that because of contamination by sulfur. This leads the fellow Attilius to go and to look at all the rest of them, and is finding out that all of the houses along the road are slowly running. What's the word? They're slowly becoming infected, and the water's stopping. It's like, oh, what is this about? Obviously, it's about the eruption. This is a book about Pompeii that's set in 79. It's the eruption. But yeah, they meet Pliny. Pliny is Pliny, which is a code for terribly obtuse and tendency to go back on himself, which is a characteristic of most Roman authors. But he's going back to Pompeii, because that's the one place that hasn't gone down. Yeah. Oh, and the mother of the slave that was eaten by eels just got beaten to death. So far, a lot and also nothing's happened, because if you know what the ending is, which everyone does picking up this book, everyone knows the eruption of Pompeii is a thing that, like, there are books for children about it. There are many books for children about it. You know, they're like I Survived Pompeii, that sort of stuff. So it kind of renders everything up to this point, at least, so far, all of this pointless, because it's very hard to engage and really find the subject interesting when you know the reason that no one else knows, which can create some like drama and stuff if it's like a thriller thing, which kind of is working, I guess, as like, you know, like a tragedy. There's the term, not thriller, but it also just kind of makes it really hard to care about any of the characters. I really just kind of want Attilius to survive. He's going to Pompeii, and I'm like, no, don't go to Pompeii. You're gonna die. You're gonna die. But actually, it's hard to get interested right now. I'm kind of. If this wasn't a thing for class, I think I would stop reading it, because it's like, or if I wasn't documenting it actually, because this book is the conclusion of it's foregone, I think. Deep. Getting more current appears that they've gone there, and the man. How do you describe the man and the eels? He put some eels. He's the guy who killed his slave. But he was an ex-slave himself, and apparently he's also now basically taking over his master's house by marrying his daughter to his ex-master. His ex-master's son? I think they're trying to do a romance subplot with the girl, which, like, I mean, I can kind of see the vibes, but it's also, like, a little weird, just because it's a child. I mean, there's no proof that she's a child. I don't know her exact age. The only thing is that she's, like, the man she's marrying is, like, 60, or in his 60s, and she's young.
Still weird.
It's very weird. But, yes, it's interesting. And I just saw one of the most infuriating arguments of my life. Because the two... Shit! God damn. I am trying this again. I am 40 page. Which is deeper than before. Like 100 and something pages. This bad boy. So... He has gotten to Pompeii. Turns out... The reason Corax, who is the worst... didn't want him there was because this is actually where Exomnius really lived. It's probably also why he hates this new guy so much, because he probably had a bunch of power, because the guy wasn't always home. He sets everyone up. He goes to the house of, like, the guy in charge. They have the most infuriating argument of all time, where they, mostly because it's very realistic, where they deprioritize the lives of, like, 500,000 people because they could make a profit. It also doesn't directly affect them, and is only stopped when the slave owner, who threw that slave in the eels, and also beat his mother for trying to stop her son from being murdered by eels. I think, generally. I think that's the reason why. I know that's what she was beaten. And he rescues her and probably gonna look after her if they all survive this, I guess. They're in Misenum, so they'll probably survive the eruption. Well, they will survive the eruption. Misenum is pretty safe. He might not, because he's in Pompeii now. But yes, because there's a fish farm there. And apparently, so Ampulius, the guy who was previously a slave, who's now the master who threw someone into the fish, in with the eels. I don't think I said that he was previously a slave. He was previously a slave. He is now free. His daughter, he is forcing his daughter to marry his old master, who's being forced to divorce by him because he's now wealthier and doing better than his ex-master. This is also why he's getting the supplies to repair his pump. So, yeah. Which is great, I guess. It's pretty frustrating, and honestly, some interesting things. Where does my notes go? Here it is. So, I was looking at it, and there's a brief mention of brothels. There are brothels in Pompeii. They mentioned 9 brothels. Inaccurate. There are definitely not 9 brothels in Pompeii, as we know of. Unless the sections that are unexcavated are overflowing with brothels, probably not true. There's some art around, but those are not brothels. That is a different sort of thing. Also, so Pliny dies in the eruption. He moves in. This is actual Latin stuff. Like I translated and read this a couple months back, but he dies probably from inhalation of smoke, suffocating him as he sleeps. After he moves in to try and help someone in Stabia. Because of this, it is Pliny the Younger, who writes this account, says that his uncle's lungs were known to be weak. But because of this, Harris kind of makes it seem like he's a very corpulent and like unfit man, which I don't know if we have tons of evidence of that. Like, lifting his hand is terrible exercise to impale someone, and breathing is nightmare, and he's suffering, which goes against him previously, where he's known to be like sort of large and not kind of surprising for who he is, but not particularly strange. It's an interesting bit of dramatization. I think it's supposed to make him seem more unfit or something. But yes, it's mostly going well. Honestly, it's still very hard to like get into it. There's a moment with the girl who comes to get him for that farm. That where she's the one being married off. I think they're trying to do a romance subplot, and I don't know if I'm entirely down with that. Because, like, yes, she's being forced to marry someone 60 plus. He's like 27, and maybe that's good for the time. I don't know how old she's supposed to be. Probably not 27, because then she's going to marry based on customs. But also, this takes place like right before the eruption. I don't know if it's like a good book to do that in. Not sure. Anyway, I'll get back to you when I do more readings. Let's use the slightly changed new location. It's late. Late sleeping. So update at 148 pages. What's really happened is Ampolitis really sucks. He's the worst guy. He's an abusive father and spouse, and also somehow like host. He traps everyone in his orbit, and also he's planning to kill Attilius, because Attilius isn't going to play his games. Oh, there is one thing, which, if I'd known beforehand, I would have put at the very beginning of all this. There is a use of, I don't know if it's correct to call it the N-word. It's not the thing, but it's like a Spanish, like for example, the Spanish word black, that word, but this is in a Spanish book, and this came out in 2003. So it's well, I don't know actually what I could say about it. It's a random one-off descriptor for a non-named character, a prostitute. This book is not for kids or anything. It's, you know, it's got sex and all sorts of stuff. Sex, violence, you know, some curse words and stuff, but like, yeah, that happened, and let's just say, I don't know, dead dove don't eat. This is a mention of it. It happens. It's not important to the plot. It's not necessarily used in a derogatory sense. It's a pure descriptive sense, but it is still used, and this is still a book from the 21st century. So that kind of makes this whole thing a little unusual. Besides that, if you can really get over that, really nothing entirely significant happens. He gets his crew, they're heading out. Some guys haven't come back. But yeah, there you go. Alright, so, like, jump. This is over now. I read a bunch of it on the train and therefore couldn't record any of it. So I'm going to kind of give a quick description from that point. I mean, a lot happens and not a lot happens. They fix the aqueduct, and there's some drama there, but and it's strange and weird, you know how it is. So they fix the aqueduct, and then Corellia, I want to call her Cordelia, but no, Corellia appears, and it's like, they're trying to kill you. Also, the Examius, previous Aquarius, was embezzling from people, and that's how he made all his money. And there also might be a volcanic eruption. So like, okay, he decides, I'm going to go to the top of the volcano right before the eruption to make sure. So he goes up there and finds the dead body of Examius because he got probably CO2. I don't know not much about volcanoes, but he inhaled some gases that killed him. He lay down and died. And Corax, the guy who he was like fighting with, the previous leader of the like group, who hated him with a knife, who's trying to kill him on the orders of Ampeliatus, because he's not going to go with the whole water thing, because he's an honest man. The fight is quite undramatic, actually. He falls, I think, because it's not entirely clear. Something about like the gases kill him, and then the eruption begins, first stage, and he just starts racing down the thing on his horse, and he somehow lives that, and he keeps going and going to get to Pliny, I believe. He's trying to get to Pliny to like tell Pliny that it's a volcanic eruption. It's not like a storm or an earthquake. Now, we flash back to Ampeliatus and Corellia. Corellia has been forced back by Attilius, mostly because like, I can't take you because that's technically your father's property, and even if your marriage sucks, I can't do anything because he's lawful good in the worst way, for lack of a better word. So she's stuck, and also she's been locked in a room because this whole thing. He nearly hits her. They find out about volcanic eruption right before it happens because they get access to the documents, because the documents are returned. Corellia is locked in her room, so she is trapped there. And her brother leaves without her. Is it her brother? It's either her brother, whatever happens. Yeah, her brother, someone leaves without her, abandons her, and doesn't come and like save her. Instead, like fucks off because of the raining rocks, and she's locked in this room because she's in trouble for spilling secrets and shit, and running away from home. Ignore the hair. It's been a time. I spent most of yesterday in the hospital, so not me visiting. But yes, so she's locked there. He gets down to Pliny. Pliny's leaving to like get a closer look because he's the dumbest motherfucker. The dumbest man to ever exist. I mean, he's very smart, but he's also very dumb. Very wizard of him. But yes, so he's going. Attilius says, hey, it's a volcano. Also, on the way, I found this letter. Well, I got this letter for this library. They want help. So he's like, cool, we're going to do that. Instead, well, he's more like, we're going to do that instead. So he does that. Well, tries to. It doesn't go well. You can tell I'm someone who curses a lot, and I'm trying not to curse. It doesn't go well, and instead they end up at a different friend's house in a different location in Stabia, which is in accordance with the letters of the time. That is a really interesting detail. They include a lot of those details from the letters that Pliny the Younger writes afterwards, describing the death of Pliny the Elder. It's the only actual account we have of the eruption. It's very interesting and also not too difficult to read, presuming you know Latin. I had to translate it for a class. It's kind of funny, because there's the second one about his experience, in which it's just being like, yeah, I just kind of had to stand in the open, and it wasn't that bad. Nothing terrible happened because he's in Misenum, so that's a distance away, which is where he gets to. There's an earthquake for them, and he kind of is fine. He's invited to join, like in the letters, but that's not entirely important. But yes, so they're there. They're trapped there because of the winds. The winds on the boat they took are not going to go and let them leave. So they're like, so, right, whole story. Stuff happens. It gets worse and then a little better. The pumice that's running with this guy gets harder, which is accurate, I believe. And there is a break because it's not pumice anymore. It's going to be something else soon. But in that time, Attilius decides he's going back to Pompeii because he runs into either the soon-to-be husband or... No, it's... The last chapter, the very last bit is interesting because it contradicts not the rest of it, but like the last 2 chapters before it. Hence why I'm having this trouble with whether or not this boy was there. I'm going to say he was, and then I'm going to say the other thing is just the story that's told about it, because the last chapter is very interesting. So he's there, and he's like, I didn't get my sister because she was locked in the room and there was rocks in the air, and he's called a coward. He kind of is. So Attilius decides, I'm going to go back to Pompeii with this helmet, and I'm going to rescue her. And he manages, just barely. He nearly dies. He passes out for a while, but he gets back up and digs himself out of his own grave. Can't find her in the home, but it fits the description after barely finding the home, because the home is very discreet, which is very common for Pompeian buildings, and also most buildings in the cities. The interior is the big draw of most of these homes are decoration, but the outside, you'll find graffiti on them from random people. They had a big public urination problem, so a lot of them are probably covered in urine. But she's not there. But he was building a bath, so he's like, that's where I'm going to go. And Pelagius is crazy. He's like, oh, it's great. You need to make sure the aqueducts are still working, and and we're going to open up, and we're like, the Sibyl, which is this prophecy and it's a really interesting thing, actually. Sorry, I skipped the prophecy. There's this prophecy that he gets commissioned that basically says, in 1,000 years' time, Rome will be, nothing that it is right now, but Pompeii will be remembered as it was right now, forever. Which is true. This is the book about that. But it's because of the wreck and the ruin, it becomes because of this. Yeah, it's like people from all around the world will come here, it'll be a center of stuff. Well, it's one of the first large-scale archaeological digs. It's brilliant. A lot of our knowledge about Roman stuff comes from Pompeii. If you look at examples from non-Pompeii textbooks of certain kinds of the baths, and for example, they will use the Stalvian baths of Pompeii. Outside of even Roman stuff, because Roman stuff change, and also Roman stuff was demolished to do other stuff with that land, whereas Pompeii it's not frozen. That's a bad thing because it was damaged heavily in the eruption. And there's years, and also it was in a state of repair because there was 17, 18 years beforehand, there was a earthquake which destroyed a lot of the city. So it's not preserved perfectly the way people think. And also the eruption took hours. So people took stuff. So it's not perfect, but we have a lot. So goes to the baths. He's holding them hostage. He's like, we're going to open it again. We're going to have everything controlled. It's going to be great. Because he made all his money just afterwards by using this, situation to his advantage to buy really cheap real estate. He's like, we're going to do it again. We're going to do it better. But, of course, Attilius knows that this is just a break and worse is coming. So he's, able to get her away. This combat where she, lights the guy who's holding them all hostage on fire. And they begin running while the, rest of them pursue. But then the last chapter begins. The last chapter is interesting because it's not necessarily from any of the perspectives. It's like telling the story of what happened. Exactly. That's a bad way of phrasing it. Let me find the game of that. Yeah, the helmet bucket. Okay. Yeah, it's like here, the storm races down. This is what it is. People are looking. It's scattered. A lot of people die, and this, like, it's basically. But here's what happens to each of them, and it includes that the sun is fleeing, but the sun appeared earlier, and I'm pretty sure it was the sun, but it was late, and I had a bad day yesterday. And the mother definitely died, or it could have been the people who were marrying. Yes, that was it. It was the people who were marrying and his mother, who Ampelius was also sleeping with on the side. I would say, this is definitely a book meant for adults. There is sex, there is some graphic stuff, and there's also, a lot of violence and stuff. And also it's kind of boring. Yeah, all the people are dying, and it's very confusing what happened to Attilius and Corellia. It really seems like they died. But, all these things happen. Pliny dies, and it describes how Pliny dies, which is very accurate to the generalized narrative of Pliny's death. But it kind of goes down, and it ends with this like idea that they tunneled away, but that's a story that's definitely not true. Underground water tunnels, but the way they're phrasing it, and also the way that these sound exactly like the two lovebird characters, it's almost certainly it's supposed to be them, and it's probably implying that it's actually true because he has this knowledge of the underground water and the ways it works, and maybe that saves them. But that's the story, honestly. 5, 6 out of 10. I liked the ending. I liked the last bit when the eruption began, but the rest of it was just build up for that, because all the stuff that he begins in the very beginning of this book caring about, all of this stuff, all of it, none of it's important. The aqueduct, who cares about the aqueduct? The aqueduct doesn't matter. It does say it runs for many hundreds more years, but that's not the problem. All this time about the aqueduct, about the corruption of Eximonius, all of it is not important. Corellia is important. She's important. But the thing is, there were so many other ways she could have been someone else. The story could have been completely different, because all that he cares about for 70, 80% of this book does not matter. And it is mentioned in the book. All that any of the characters care about for all this is not mentioned. The only person who knew what was going on was Eximonius, and he's dead the whole book. And then in the very end of this book, they are like, oh yes, we know what's going on, and it's the reaction to it, which is really interesting. But the fact that it's just all the things that you care about, all the intrigue, all the villains you want punished, all the annoying people do not matter, because at the end of the day, they cannot get their comeuppance, not in the way that they deserve, because they're all going to die to the volcano, or they will escape, and maybe something will happen. But it ends with the eruption. They all die. And Pelagius dies. Masavo, his guard slave, dies. Bebix, who is a pretty decent guy, but he dropped him and might have been trying to kill him, dies. Everyone dies, which is that's a cool story. Also, the main two characters might have died. I liked the ending. I liked how they were there was this mystery thing, but that wasn't built up enough, because you could have rewritten this entire story and just made any of the other men in the gang, out of the workers, the person who the story was about. Change almost nothing. Have Attilius right there and doing all the discussion stuff, and just forward whatever love thing, and you could tell the exact same story. His position, the only thing that mattered would be the ending and making it somewhat realistic, which is cool. It's very interesting, but there's so much of this book that does not matter. The entire Eximonius subplot doesn't matter. Okay, not the entire thing, but enough of it does not matter. The fact that he was going to marry this prostitute, or said he was, doesn't matter. His corruption, honestly, end of the day, does not matter. Because anyone who was involved or knew is dead. The guy who he was being bribed by, him, the guy who could do something about it, the guy with the papers themselves, all of it, gone. No one can face punishment for it. No one. Not even the people you hate the most. None of them face punishment because they're all just dead. And yes, it's a book about Pompeii. So, like, to a degree, you expect people to die. You expect most people to die. But then why did you focus so much of this narrative and try and make us invested in stuff that everyone who goes into the narrative knows doesn't matter? You start every single chapter with a discussion of how eruptions begin and how to, like, help build it up. You start everything with an hour number instead of, like, a number. You say Nocturne in Interpestia with a number, like, underneath it, you know, or X day hours into the eruption, you know, all these things from this idea, all of it building to this point, and so much of it is so hard to engage with, so hard to care about, because you know it does not matter. 6 out of 10. The last 20% was really good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the chaos. It very well captured it. There's a lot of really good, like, historical details. A lot of it does feel very Roman and not like a sort of pop culturalized sense. I didn't love how it portrayed some of the sexuality of Pompeii, or lack thereof, actually. It made a lot of assumptions that everything that was phallic was sexual. Priapus is a very important god, especially in the region. There's a lot of Priapus declarations, and Priapus is known for having a very large phallus. Massive. I'm not going to make jokes about it. He's a god of fertility, yes, but he's also a god of luck. A lot of the phalluses are luck-based totems, and it's recognized in this. And then they go on and say something counterintuitive. Some of the details of stuff. Obviously, the main character doesn't exist. These things are invented for the narrative. But it is... I think I enjoyed it. I would not recommend that you read it. If you're going to Pompeii, maybe. But there's hold on. Let me just quickly. But I recommend this book, which is Paul Wilkinson, Pompeii, an Archaeological Guide. Instead, some of it's a little prosaic, but it's basically a guide to all the regions, every house, not every house, but like most houses. Here's the house of the faun. Here's the theaters. All these important locations, even some of the villas outside, and it has a lot of details and some very interesting stuff. There's also images of like some of the art and drawings from the homes, and it's got some very interesting stuff. I think this, if you were going, would be a better idea to maybe look at, to read, especially if you're like, you really want to get like a lot of the knowledge. It's very useful. I don't know, maybe read this on the plane over there, if you really wanted to. 7 out of 10. Anyway, thank you for listening to me going a little crazy over this book. It was assigned for a class project, sorry. So I kind of made this as a way of letting myself get through it, because otherwise I think I would have probably quit like halfway through and just like try to skim it or something, or get whatever knowledge I could from the actual like classes about the book's plot, because I have to write a piece on it. But yeah, Pompeii by Robert Harris. Thank you for watching.